Unbelievable transformation. Marine and K9 discover an elderly couple's hidden paradise revealed. Jack hadn't expected to feel so lost when he returned home. The small, familiar streets of his Midwestern town felt alien to him now. With every step through the quaint homes and scattering of kids on bikes, he found himself yearning for the structure and camaraderie of military life, the smell of gun oil mixed with the adrenaline of action, now replaced by a disquieting silence. He was battling ghosts in his mind as he navigated through the remnants of a life he once belonged to. Living in the past had become much easier than trying to forge a new future. To fill the void, Jack threw himself into volunteering at the local animal shelter. That's where he met Max, a spry, intelligent K9 with a spirit that matched Jack's own restless heart. Together, they walked through the town, the rhythmic clip-clop of paws on pavement pulling Jack away from intrusive memories of distant gunfire and faces that haunted him. But one sunny afternoon, while striding through the neighborhoods, they stumbled upon a dilapidated house buried in weeds, its potential hidden beneath layers of neglect. Curiosity piqued, Jack approached the elderly couple, Eleanor and Frank. Their stories unfurled like the roses they once nurtured in their garden, vivid laughs and memories laced with sorrow and longing. Time had not only aged them, but had crept through every corner of their home, silencing the joy it once held. Each word they shared both broke his heart and reignited a flicker of purpose in Jack. He felt an urgency to help, an instinct that was almost military in its precision. Together, with Max darting around, they began reclaiming the untended garden. Jack's hands scraped and calloused but steady, as though laying the bricks of a new foundation. Yet as Jack immersed himself in their lives, he wrestled with his own shadows. Memories of comrades lost would jolt him when the sun dipped lower in the sky, darkness creeping into the corners of his thoughts. He had expected to be a soldier, but found himself caught between worlds. The internal struggle unfurled like an indomitable weed, pulling at the roots of his heart and hope. Could he protect the couple's dreams while still confronting the need for his own stability? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. When news hit that a construction company had their eyes set on Eleanor and Frank's property, a knot tightened in Jack's gut, the very essence of his newfound purpose now under siege. The dollar signs seemed to glint with temptation. What lay ahead felt like a treacherous balancing act between greed and responsibility. Adrenaline raced through him, his breath shallow as he faced this overwhelming decision. He stood before Eleanor and Frank, heart heavy with emotion, unsure of where to direct his loyalty. The stakes rose, each whisper of the impending offer intensifying his anguish. Where would he find the strength to protect their legacy? As all eyes turned to him for guidance, a storm brewed in Jack's chest, the direction of their lives now resting on his shoulders. A weight against an uncertain future just waiting to be decided. The oppressive weight of responsibility pressed down on Jack, stealing his breath as panic began to claw at his chest. He needed clarity, a plan. The details of the construction company circled in his mind like vultures honing in on their prey. He remembered the little moments spent with Eleanor and Frank, laughing over shared stories, planning the revival of their garden, the sparkle in their eyes when discussing their dreams. This was more than just a home to them. It was a testament to years of hope, love, and resilience. To let it go would mean dismantling a legacy. Yet the lure of the construction deal loomed large, promising financial security, even a way to escape the stagnation that plagued Jack's own life. He caught himself wavering, beginning to rationalize. Couldn't everyone use a fresh start? Perhaps it would be best to help them secure a deal rather than risking them losing everything. The conflict within him twisted like a double helix, each strand pulling him in opposite directions. Max sensed Jack's turmoil, drawing closer, nudging his hand with a comforting nudge. The K9's instincts mirrored Jack's internal dialogue. He needed to fight for what was right, not only for the couple, but for himself. He had fought enemies before in the line of duty, But this battle against time and moral decay felt even more daunting. Could he muster the courage now, when it mattered most? Fueled by a sudden determination, Jack decided to dig deeper. The next day he visited the local library, sifting through municipal records and property details. The clock on the wall ticked annoyingly, a persistent reminder of the impending deadline. Hours turned into minutes as he pieced together information about the construction company and its intentions. He discovered plans for high-end developments, luxury homes, and a new shopping complex. Jack scowled at the thought of bustling traffic where laughter used to echo across the yard. Armed with knowledge, Jack reported back to Eleanor and Frank, their eyes widening as he laid the facts bare. The couple's resolve faltered, their smiles dimmed by anxiety. The dreams they had nurtured were, after all this time, hanging by a thread. Jack recognized the look of despair. He had seen it too often before in the eyes of soldiers before deployment. He needed to galvanize them, inspire them, pull them together. Listen, Eleanor. Frank. This isn't just about preserving a patch of earth. It's about holding on to your legacy. We can make this home a sanctuary again. You both deserve to have that. He looked them squarely in the eye, challenging their doubts. They took a breath together, a silent pact forming in the air among them. But as Jack watched their resolve rebuild, the weight of their reliance on him curled around his heart like a vice. Could he sustain their hopes while confronting his own fears? Doubt surged, crashing against his newfound mission, and the looming shadow of the construction company threatened to engulf them all. Days passed, filled with sweat and determination. Man and dog, along with Eleanor and Frank, toiled tirelessly to restore the garden, while Jack planned a community meeting to rally support against the construction project. Still, his evenings were laden with the ghosts of his past, whispering reminders of his failures and losses. As he lay awake, wrestling with the sense of worthlessness that clung to him, Jack realized he was at a crossroads. Now more than ever, he needed to confront his own demons. The time had come to face the part of himself he had buried during combat. A soldier, yes, but also a man capable of growth and healing. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation. Tomorrow he would speak out, stand in defiance of the looming threat. And somewhere in that darkness, he could almost feel the stirrings of a warrior rising again within him. But as dawn approached, Jack wouldn't just be fighting for Eleanor and Frank's home. He would be battling for his own sense of worth, his identity unfolding like a flower in the sun. What would he discover about himself in this fight? Would courage blossom, or would he falter? Fear coursed through Jack as he stood on the podium, the makeshift stage set up in the modest community park. The chatter of concerned neighbors surrounded him, a sea of familiar faces, yet he felt a cavernous disconnect, as if he were peering through a window at a life he once knew. Clutching the lectern, he surveyed the crowd, their expressions painted with anticipation and anxiety. This moment felt monumental. He was no longer a mere observer but stepping into a pivotal role, a reluctant leader defending something greater than himself. His palms were clammy, the weight of expectation pressing down like the barrel of a gun. Jack drew a deep breath, reminding himself of the tenacity shown by Eleanor and Frank. In that instant, they became his anchor. He recalled their laughter, their dreams, their unwavering spirit despite encroaching uncertainty. As he began to speak, words tumbled out with an earnest pitch, echoing his internal transformation. Thank you all for gathering here today. I know our neighborhood faces a significant challenge. There's a threat looming over this land, over the homes, our community's heart. It's not just about losing a garden, it's about defending our history and protecting what we love. As he spoke, he caught sight of Eleanor nodding with tear-streaked cheeks. She was his muse, driving him to confront the specters of his own past. Jack's resolve strengthened, and a newfound clarity washed over him. The fear of failure that had once gripped him now felt less like a burden and more like a catalyst for growth. With every word, he unearthed his hidden capabilities, drawing strength from both the present stakes and his own turbulent history. I may not be a seasoned politician or a community activist, but I am a soldier. I know about fighting, about standing for something even when it seems impossible. And I ask you, do we let this construction company erase our memories, our culture? Or do we stand united? Even as he declared these words, Jack felt a tremor of doubt, questioning if he truly had the capability to lead his neighbors to victory. But then he remembered nights spent laboring in the garden, the camaraderie forged with Eleanor and Frank. They looked up to him, burning with fire and anticipation. Could he ignite that same flame in others? The community rallied behind him, voices rising together as he invited anyone willing to join the fight. An overwhelming surge of faith and urgency suffused the crowd. As hands shot up, offering time and resources, Jack's heart raced. This wasn't just a fight for land, it was a reclamation of identity. Jack stepped down from the podium, adrenaline coursing through him. He felt the warm embrace of purpose wrap fervently around his being. This confrontation was no longer about saving a house or a garden. It was deeply personal. He was about to learn who he was, who he could become. Late into the night, he began crafting a plan. Strategies unfolded, practical steps materializing out of desperation and hope. Each decision solidified his metamorphosis, elucidating a roadmap towards a renewed self. No longer just a vessel for others' dreams, he would be an architect of his own future. Yet deep within, doubts lingered, lurking like shadows refusing to fade. The construction company was relentless and resourceful. Jack knew that as much as he now had support, they would not back down easily. A confrontation loomed in the distance, and he could feel the tension in the air like a drawn bowstring. As the lines between past and present blurred, Jack grappled with the gnawing realization that each step forward brought him closer to not just a confrontation with the company, but also a confrontation with his own self-worth. Would he rise to the occasion, or would he buckle under pressure? And so, he resolved to take it one day at a time. With a tentative smile, he felt Max press against his side, steadying him. Tomorrow would bring challenges, decisions that could unravel the delicate tapestry he was weaving. Was he ready to face whatever lay ahead, or would the past's demons reinstate their hold on him? As the dawn broke, Jack sat at his kitchen table. The remnants of his meticulous plan sprawled before him like a battlefield map. Handwritten notes littered with strategic ideas and action steps stared back at him, urging him to act. Yet, the weight of yesterday's rally hung heavy on his shoulders, the echo of his own speech reverberating like a challenge demanding fulfillment. The steady rhythm of Max's breathing reminded him that he wasn't alone in this fight, yet the dog's presence also amplified Jack's internal turmoil. What if he faltered? What if the unwavering trust of Eleanor and Frank disintegrated the moment he faced real pressure? Taking a deep breath, Jack stood up, his resolve hardening. He had a responsibility now, not just to the community, but to himself. Wrestling with self-doubt was exhausting, but it was also necessary. Jack knew he needed allies in this struggle, a team that could amplify their voices against the construction company. He decided to reach out to some local activists he'd met during his sporadic visits to community forums. They had been passionate about various causes, their energy still flickering in his memory. He grabbed his phone and navigated to the familiar contacts, his fingers hovering over their names. The act of reaching out felt like stepping into the dark waters of uncertainty once more. Would they dismiss him as a newcomer, just another fleeting interest? The fear clawed at him, but surrounding uncertainty was an opportunity, one that could either suffocate or empower him. Dialing the first number, he felt a rush of adrenaline. "This is Jack," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The conversation flowed surprisingly well, with the activist expressing interest in his mission to win back the neighborhood's heart. They discussed strategies, mobilizing resources and potential allies. He sensed growing enthusiasm on the other end, an eagerness that filled him with a flicker of hope. By the time he hung up, Jack felt slightly lighter. He committed to hosting an informal meeting in his backyard that weekend. It would be a small gathering, just enough to start building a coalition. But would a handful of friends be enough to stand against the formidable entity of a construction company? This nagging question taunted him post-call, almost mocking his ambition. As the days progressed, he moved forward cautiously, but assertively. Jack began perusing literature on community organization, trying to absorb knowledge, methods that had been proven to work. Each turn of a page sparked ideas of how he could prepare for his unveiled aspirations. He started drafting an outline for the meeting, emphasizing shared investment in their cause and cultivating a sense of ownership among attendees. The deeper he delved into the subject, the more he uncovered skills he didn't know he had. He was becoming a strategist, a figure capable of encompassing both the tactical and emotional aspects necessary for change. Yet, lurking behind every skill acquired was a growing sense of trepidation. What if he called upon these newfound abilities only to fall short of expectations? As he grappled with these feelings, he couldn't help but reflect on his past failures. Memories of his decisions swirling back from his time in the military surfaced. The weight of command, the repercussions of missteps. Every miscalculation had felt like a breach of trust, a bitter pill that had haunted him. With each passing hour, urgency propelled Jack forward. He started to confront not only the specter of the construction company, but also fragments of accountability he had not embraced previously. He had been avoiding the necessary discomfort that came with true leadership. Taking ownership of his actions allowed him to redefine himself as a proactive agent rather than a passive vessel. In the solitude of his living room, staring blankly at his laptop, he resolved to write a personal manifesto, a declaration outlining his vision and commitment. As he typed away, the words became a catalyst, formalizing his intent to elevate beyond the confines of doubt and helplessness. This wasn't merely a fight for land. It was a reclamation of everything he had stifled for years. But lurking just beyond the edge of his newfound confidence was the gnawing realization that the construction company had begun to mobilize their own forces. Jack felt the urgency build deep inside him. The time had come to face the power they wielded head-on. Was he truly ready for the confrontation that loomed ahead? Or would he lose himself amidst the chaos? As he hit save on his manifesto, a sudden shake of his resolve washed over him, and he knew the battle was just beginning. The stage was set, but the outcome depended on his willingness to walk into the fray. Would he command the courage to confront not only the outside forces threatening his community, but those fears entwined in his own psyche? Jack's backyard was an unremarkable plot of land, but in the early evening light, with vibrantly blooming flowers and the comforting rustle of leaves, it felt warm and inviting. Yet, beneath the surface of this pastoral setting was tension, unsettled anticipation fueled by his recent decisions. Tomorrow he would host his first gathering, a test of sorts to determine if he could transform his vision from chiaroscuro into a vivid landscape of collaboration. He surveyed the space one last time, dropping his gaze nervously to his notes, scattered once more across the table. They felt inadequate against the enormity of his mission, like small pebbles against a looming mountain. Did he really possess the capability to inspire others, to mobilize them against a corporate Goliath? Or were these notes merely testimonials to his growing detachment from self-doubt, words strung together with the hope of a brighter future? Courage is not the absence of fear, he muttered under his breath, reminding himself of an adage he had once clung to during his military service. With the mantra swirling in his head, Jack felt the presence of Eleanor and Frank, whose belief in him amplified his internal conflict. Could he stand up not just for them, but for all those who had come before him? As the sun dipped beyond the tree line, drawing a curtain of twilight over the yard, Jack's mobilization attempts began to appear more like wishful thinking than a solid plan. Did desire equate to capability? Could camaraderie manifest purely from shared grievances? He wrestled with these questions while pacing the length of the backyard, determined to channel that restless energy into something tangible. That night, he set to work refining his manifesto further. Driven by urgency rather than lethargy, he crafted every sentence, feeling the pulse of potential with each keystroke. This document was not only about the struggle against the construction company. It reflected the synthesis of his experiences, the remorse, the aspirations, and the longing to build something meaningful. He resolved to convey his commitment and resolve through persuasive language designed to touch their emotions, to make people feel he understood their plight. But beneath his facade of determination lingered self-doubt. The fear of failure was no distant specter. It thrummed in his veins. What if the meeting devolved into a series of empty promises? What if he could not inspire the connection he so desperately craved? Confidence, he reminded himself, was a choice. He had felt its warmth before. Now it was time to awaken that part of himself. The clock ticked insistently as Jack prepared a simple outline to guide the conversation. He envisioned the room filling with skeptical faces, eager for validation but hesitant to invest their energy. How could he effectively bridge that gap between his ambitions and the community's skepticism? Would heartfelt stories about his own struggles translate to enthusiasm, or would they feel like stagnant platitudes? He sank into the couch, the weight of responsibility washing over him. As exhaustion tugged at his eyelids, he made a pact with himself. Tomorrow would be a turning point, but the way it tilted depended entirely on the steps he was willing to take. As sleep claimed him, images of the construction company looming over the neighborhood played havoc with his dreams, crushing hope underfoot with their incessant machinery. He woke with a jolt, beads of sweat clinging to his forehead, the remnants of unrest heavy in his chest. Today was not merely about mobilizing others, it would also be about confronting his own insecurities. He straightened up, determination carving sharp lines into his features. The real battle wasn't outside against the developers, it lay within his grasp. The sun's light streaming through the kitchen window rekindled a fierce resolve in him. With every action he took today, Jack would not just lay the groundwork for their shared cause, he would reclaim his own authority over fear. Tomorrow would reveal not just a community ready to fight, but an individual rising to be more than he had ever been. But just as the warmth infused him with vigor, a sudden thought pierced through the anticipation. What if he faced a harsher reality in that backyard? What if the skepticism turned into outright resistance? He would soon learn whether he could navigate this minefield of doubt or be overwhelmed by it. With a renewed focus on the horizon, Jack planned to walk into that uncertainty, ready, no matter the cost. As dawn broke, the soft chirping of birds harmonized with the urgent beating of Jack's heart. The intimacy of morning, once a balm against all troubles, turned frenetic as he reviewed his checklist for the day. Each detail felt like a thread weaving into a larger tapestry he desperately wanted to create. An intricate design of resolve and action. He looked around the house, every corner infused with an insistent energy, as if the walls themselves echoed their expectations. The coffee machine burbled in the background, while he absently flipped through his notes, barely able to focus on the words scrawled across the pages. They felt simultaneously vital and meaningless, stirring up memories of his disciplined days in the service when every piece of equipment needed meticulous attention. Had he truly prepared for this new battle? He couldn't help but envision the faces that might fill the backyard. Would they mirror his concern or reflect an eager anticipation? He envisioned himself standing there, clad in the armor of his carefully crafted manifesto, ready to combat the detachment that had often settled over him during moments of uncertainty. In the days leading up to today, each encounter had settled into his conscience, a blend of hope and apprehension. His conversations with Eleanor brought back laughter, but Frank's straight-laced frown reminded him of the acute stakes at hand. They were counting on him, and in that trust lay potential as well as the weight of expectation. With each sip of coffee, he felt that familiar fire stoking from within. Today couldn't merely be about them. It had to be about him too. As a Marine, he had learned to rely on his training, but this venture demanded not just reflexes or strategy, but a fundamental challenge. His own ability to connect. He thrust himself into preparation, parking his doubts on the back burner. Jack exercised his vocal cords, speaking his manifesto aloud, imagining the crowd before him, eyes roving and ears eager. Did he have the wherewithal to translate his willingness into conviction, to ignite their spirits and incite action? Each repetition fueled his confidence, like artillery in a backup plan waiting to be unleashed. Time slipped away, yet he grasped it desperately, settling into a rhythm. A gentle breeze wafted through open windows, blowing away the remnants of apprehension that had clung to him. As he laid out chairs in rows across the yard, the thought of individuals soon to occupy those seats shifted his mindset. They would come with their own stories, their own hesitations and hopes, and he sought to embrace that diversity, rather than overshadow it with his own. By the time he finished setting up, an hour had slipped like sand through fingers. Taking a step back, he surveyed the space, transformed by his own diligence. It was no longer just a backyard. This was a stage for change. Yet, as he closed his eyes to steady his nerves, a gnawing thought crept in, gnashing against his newfound resolve. What if it wasn't enough, Jack inhaled sharply, reminding himself of the reasons he'd begun this journey. Each breath filled his lungs with determination. No matter how they reacted, today was a clear break from the past. It was his moment to drop the reluctant soldier's armor and embrace vulnerability, to show up as he truly was, dedicated, flawed, and profoundly human. As the clock struck the hour, he stood anxiously by the door, watching for the first flickers of movement in the neighborhood. Would his voice rise above the noise of doubt, or would fear encircle him yet again? Jack felt a surge of impetus, not just to advocate for others but to acknowledge who he was becoming within the process. It would be a day of reckoning, a challenge of self and spirit that might either empower him or lay bare his weaknesses in the face of collective skepticism. Then, just as he steadied himself for the first greetings, a car rolled down the street, familiar faces coming into view. But something caught his attention, a shadow lingering in the background, a figure he'd never seen before. "Who's that?" he muttered, his guarded instinct flaring. The unknown seemed to shift the very ground beneath him, scattering the intense focus he had clutched like a lifeline. The day had not yet begun, and already it promised unpredictability. Jack's heart raced as the unfamiliar figure stepped out of the vehicle, a faint silhouette contrasting against the vibrant backdrop of the morning. Uncertainty clawed at him, causing his mind to orbit around the possibilities. Was this interloper simply passing by or something more? Someone curious about the gathering? Or were they there to impede, to dissect the very purpose he'd unraveled so meticulously? As the shadow drew closer, Jack's resolve solidified. Today was about more than familiarity. It was about offerings. His years in the service had prepared him for battles, but now he needed to declare his peace. He adjusted the collar of his shirt, posturing himself not as a soldier, but as a facilitator of connection. The looming uncertainty was merely a chance to engage, not a threat. As friends and neighbors began to trickle in, Jack forced himself to pay attention to their reactions. Eleanor's warm smile cut through the tension, while Frank's determination to maintain his stoic demeanor quietly implored Jack to take command. Jack reciprocated with nods and grins, though internally, he structured a mental barricade against the creeping doubt that had manifested with every new arrival. "Is that everyone?" Jack asked while shooting a fleeting glance toward the lone figure who had remained at the edge of the gathering. Their presence felt oddly significant, but he redirected his focus to the individuals seated in front of him, their looks of eagerness igniting a competitive spirit in him. He opened his mouth to begin, stilling his thoughts before launching into a passionate declaration. But just as the words began to flow, he caught the stranger's eye. A sudden jolt of connection passed between them that silenced the noise around him. In that brief moment, Jack recognized something illuminating in the stranger's gaze. A flicker of curiosity layered with hesitation, as if reflecting Jack's own internal struggle. "What brings you here?" Jack questioned the figure, stepping a bit closer despite the shift in energy surrounding them. For a moment, there was a palpable weight in the air, as his question cut through all the small talk that had been floating about. The figure shifted uncomfortably, revealing the contours of a weathered face that held unspoken stories. "I've heard there's something important happening today," the stranger replied, their voice laced with reverence, yet tinged with vulnerability. "I wasn't sure if I should come or not." Jack sensed the buildup of anticipation not just within himself, but all around him. The weight of that vulnerability resonated with him, amplifying his resolve. As a Marine, he'd faced men and women hardened by their trials, but here stood someone equally familiar with life's weight, a shared humanity that transcended the unknown. "You're welcome here," Jack said, taking a step toward the stranger. "It's not just for us, it's about building something together." He noticed the others craning their necks slightly, intrigued at the dynamic forming before them. The shift resonated in their faces, curiosity shadowed by commitment, urgency sparked by shared purpose. As he addressed the gathering, Jack wove his narrative around the thread of collective experience, rather than presenting it as an isolated endeavor. He shared fragments of his military history, not as a point of pride, but as a testament to growth, struggle, and the arduous journey of seeking connection. Every word felt significant. The tentacles of doubt receded, giving way to a burgeoning hope. When he paused, allowing the weight of his statement to settle, Jack noticed the stranger nodding, an acknowledgement that silently echoed within him. The space between them shrank, and with it, the separation he often felt from others began to dissipate. He remembered why he had begun this venture, to discover himself in the faces surrounding him. Yet, as smiles began to fill the air, the stranger's next words hung heavy like storm clouds overhead. But what if we uncover things that shouldn't be unearthed? The question resonated deeply, a new form of tension sparking through the atmosphere as Jack confronted the fragility of connection. The real battle wasn't in rallying support, it was in wrestling with unveiling truths that could reshape everything. Jack swallowed hard, the moment teetering on the brink of revelation. What if his journey of connection led to deeper discoveries? The thought infused him with both dread and exhilaration, fueling a tempest of curiosity within. Today, we will find out, he affirmed, steeling himself against this fresh uncertainty. The day had only just begun, and the outcome loomed, shrouded in mystery, igniting an internal battle he was both eager and anxious to face. "Let's begin," he said, ready to push forward into the unknown. Jack felt a shift in the air as he faced the gathering, an invisible barrier splitting them apart despite their physical closeness. The stranger's question echoed in his mind, pulling his attention back to the precarious nature of their undertaking. What lay beneath the surface of those eager faces? Would they discover strength or sow division? As he stood there, the gravity of the moment pressed heavily against his chest, provoking his thoughts. Determined to lean into the uncertainty rather than retreat, Jack took a deep breath, channeling his military training into this uncharted territory of communal interaction. "Today," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil within, "we explore not just connections but truths about ourselves. This isn't about what we can articulate to each other. It's about understanding the layers we've built over time." Frank shifted in his seat, his earlier stoicism replaced with an apprehensive curiosity. Eleanor exchanged a glance with him, her eyes revealing an unspoken encouragement. This was Jack's moment, and he felt their collective gaze rooting him on, demanding he dig deeper into the marrow of what he was trying to communicate. A wave of inspiration surged within him. What if he reframed the conversation? Instead of inviting discussion around potential unearthed demons, he could advocate for shared experiences and allow vulnerability to breach the fortress of their doubts. "I want us to share something personal, something that defines our journey," Jack proposed, scanning the crowd. The notion thrummed through him with the thrill of challenge. The stranger, who had shaped Jack's apprehension into something tangible, nodded in agreement. "I have a story," they said, taking a tentative step forward. Jack's heart lifted at their willingness. Vulnerability bred connection, a compass guiding him in uncharted waters. As the old man's tale unfolded, the pace of the gathering changed connotatively. Faces softened, eyes sparkled with recognition. A collective rhythm began to form. They exchanged laughs over the quaint absurdities of life while murmuring empathies over shared losses. Physical barriers dissolved under the warmth of narratives, bringing them closer together. Yet, as passion ignited within Jack, so did a creeping dread. The unearthed lives held answers he wasn't prepared to confront. Two stories echoed with him, those of loss and survival, yet undercurrents of guilt seeped into his recollections. Would revealing the truths behind his journey inspire or alienate those listening? He caught the stranger's eye once more, an ephemeral understanding binding their roads together. Each new revelation felt like a march toward authenticity, and Jack realized instead of impeding their progress, it could propel them forward. He cleared his throat. "We all have buried truths, some we've kept inside for too long," he said, sensing the weight of gravity in the room. "But it's in bringing them to light that we find strength." In that moment, Jack recognized a mirrored reflection in his fellow attendees. Their uncertainty. Everyone bore the burden of unseen wounds. Yet here in this space, the atmosphere pulsed with potential for healing. What was once intent on self-preservation now transformed into a commitment to growth. Frank raised his hand hesitantly. "I never really shared how I failed my family during a tough time. I thought it'd break me." His admission resonated like crackling thunder, and a reverberation of agreement traveled among the gathering. The elder couple nodded, visibly moved, their own hidden scars expanding under the weight of shared burdens. Jack was struck by the magnitude of each revelation. Could he do the same? Confronting his battles laid bare within the confines of his heart opened a portal to both fear and liberation. But with each beat of the moment, he felt a growing determination to not succumb to his fears. What if instead, this pursuit transformed into a journey of connection, unveiling hidden competencies that would deepen the bonds forged today? Taking a small step forward in this emotional minefield, Jack fixed his gaze on everyone. I want to share something too. The air thickened with anticipation, every ear attuned for the forthcoming confession. Jack's soul wrestled within the crucible of the unknown, teetering on the edge of a significant decision. Would he let them in or keep the lid shrouded? As the crowd leaned in, breath held and anxious, Jack took a deep breath. The time had come to face his truth, ready to confront the very demons he had feared would lay waste to the connection he sought to establish. Let me tell you about the one moment that changed everything for me. Jack's heart pounded in his chest, each thud echoing the weight of countless suppressed memories clawing for release. He looked at the faces before him, some curious, others expectant, and a few bearing traces of pain. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was a shared human experience, a leap of faith that could either bind them together or drive them further apart. There was a time, he began slowly, feeling the tremor in his voice, when I thought of myself as nothing more than a cog in a machine, just following orders and keeping my head down. The room hushed as his words hung in the air, weaving around the collective silence. Jack recalled the long nights, the events that followed, and the moments that tested him far beyond the battlefield. Those times spent isolated in his own thoughts felt like a weight he had carried indefinitely. I lost friends, men I considered brothers. The guilt of surviving, of not being able to save them, settled like a stone in my gut. Jack's breath quickened, but he pressed on, determined to voice the vulnerability he had kept at bay for far too long. I tried to shut it all out, he confessed. But the truth is, the more I struggled to bury those memories, the stronger they became. Around him, heads bobbed in empathy. He sensed their unspoken understanding. He noticed Frank clenching his fists, a mirror to his own battle. Jack's gaze drifted to Eleanor, whose brow furrowed, reflecting the weight of scars both spoken and unspoken. It wasn't until I allowed myself to feel that I began to understand the power of connection. Sharing those moments, the failures and the joys, is what opens us up to healing, to growth, he continued, his voice gaining momentum. I discovered that vulnerability wasn't a weakness. It was my greatest strength. A hush fell again, the crackle of uncharted territory coursing through the room. Jack dared to explore deeper, exposing the tender underbelly of his memories. I remember the last mission vividly. I had the choice to pull back or to push forward. I chose to push, believing it was for the greater good, but the cost, it weighed on my conscience. His throat tightened. Jack knew he had to push through this discomfort. This was his moment, just as it was theirs. He painted the scene for them, the aftermath burning vividly within him. That day I lost sight of what truly mattered. I was so determined to fulfill duty that I forgot about the people it affected. In that chaos I learned something crucial. Life isn't a mission to accomplish, it's the connections we form along the way that define us. The audience hung on his every word, their faces mirroring the emotions he poured out. The stories he feared would alienate had instead built bridges. Sensing the shift, Jack felt lighter, raw yet liberated. But let me clarify, he pressed. My journey doesn't end there. It's ongoing, filled with ups and downs. Sharing this part of me helps me face those demons. It gives me clarity, purpose. Jack could feel their engagement, an understanding growing, a collective pulse of newfound perspectives. Uncertainty dripped away, ushered in by the weight of shared truths. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm brewed within him. What if these revelations opened the door for judgments he could hardly bear? He was navigating his own sea of emotions, and he hesitated for a moment, eyeing the group living in their vulnerabilities. Vulnerability isn't just revealing, it's also about being proactive in our healing. he shared in a softer tone, allowing the compassion swelling in the room to settle into the spaces between them. I'm still learning how to process it all, and I welcome anyone who feels the same. In that moment, Jack witnessed a transformation, not just within himself, but in the assembly before him. A sunrise breaking through the mist of uncertainty shone bright in their interwoven stories. This was just the beginning. He felt it in his bones, yet an uneasiness knotted in his gut. Something crucial was unfolding, but he was also on the precipice of deeper revelations. Now that I've shared my truth, Jack continued, feeling the gravity of the moment shift, I invite you too, to take a step forward. As he prepared to listen to others, each with their own scars to lay bare, his heart raced with anticipation. What hidden depths would emerge, and could he fully embrace the journey alongside them? In the weeks following the gathering, Jack felt a profound shift in his perspective. The haunting whispers of self-doubt began to fade into echoes, replaced by a sound he had longed to hear. The resounding voices of solidarity and openness from his community. Each story shared not only weighed less on his heart, but illuminated paths of healing unknown to him before. Surrounding himself with others who bore their own scars and vulnerabilities fostered a sense of belonging he had thought lost forever. The connection forged between Jack, Eleanor, Frank, and the myriad of individuals who rallied around their cause spiraled into actionable unity. Faced with their common threat, the construction company, what had once felt like an insurmountable obstacle, now transformed into a battleground for reclamation. Jack's newfound role as a community leader sprang from the depths of realization. He was reclaiming not only Frank and Eleanor's home, but also his own identity. Jack organized weekly meetings where people brought their stories, concerns, and hopes for the neighborhood. As they shared laughter and tears, a steadfast resolve emerged to fight against the impending development, one fueled by personal stakes and a collective heartbeat. Jack observed how vulnerability could weave intricate tapestry, connecting their individual wounds into something truly transformative. Families neglected and hearts burdened formed a coalition that could challenge external forces. 2 months later, the construction company's heavy machinery rolled into town, but instead of terrorizing the community, it faced an organized defense. Jack felt a measure of confidence he had never experienced before. Standing amidst determined neighbors, with Max by his side, and Eleanor and Frank in the front row, he took to the podium once more. The air buzzed with energy, vibrancy palpable as the assembled crowd awaited his words. Today we fight not just for a garden, he began, pacing the makeshift stage, but for the very fabric of our stories, our shared humanity. Resonating eyes locked onto him with unwavering faith. Jack strategically recounted their journey, from sorrow and fear to courage and mutual support. Each anecdote flowed like an unstoppable river, washing away the residual debris of doubt he had always wrestled with. What we have built together is a testament to our strength. We refuse to allow their greed to steer our lives. This land is not just soil. It is roots of love and memories. It holds the laughter of children, the whispers of seniors, and the dreams of everyone who believes in community. As Jack spoke, cheers erupted from the crowd, and the air thickened with shared determination. Frank and Eleanor exchanged glances, pride reflected in their tear-filled eyes. Jack felt a sense of acknowledgement wash over him. He was fulfilling a purpose far greater than himself. His journey mirrored theirs, an intrinsic growth illuminated by shared struggles, leading them all to face their demons together. In the days that followed, the community crafted a petition and canvassed for support. They reached out to local media, drawing attention to their fight for preservation. The construction company was bewildered by the uprising, and as their plans began to waver, so too did Jack's past unease. The fear that had once dictated his actions evaporated. He had secured not only a place from which to grow, but also a solid identity. On the day of the city council meeting, Jack felt his heart race with excitement and trepidation. Standing shoulder to shoulder with his neighbors, he realized that the once dilapidated garden was now a symbol of perseverance, emblematic of resilience. The council members listened intently as stories of Eleanor and Frank meshed with narratives from other residents, painting a fully realized portrait of what their home signified. Jack saw it reflected in their faces, the mosaic of lives stubbornly striving to thrive. Victory came not just in the form of a council ruling, but in recognizing a sea change within himself and his community. The decision came down over a week later. The construction was halted, and the properties designated as historical. A collective cheer erupted as they celebrated their win, the walls of worry detaching piece by piece. "Here's to rebuilding," Jack toasted, standing with Eleanor and Frank. "Together we've embraced our vulnerabilities and stepped into our true selves." They all raised their glasses, an unspoken acknowledgement of transformation encapsulated in each laugh, embrace, and celebration. Jack stood tall that day as they reflected on what they'd achieved, but beyond that, he realized that a deeper victory had taken place within him. No longer confined by his haunting past or uncertain future, he had carved a path buoyed by the recognition of shared humanity. He had learned to confront the intricacies of pain, shaped a new identity, and discovered that his heart could remain open to others, to love, and to himself. As he looked into the gleaming eyes of Frank and Eleanor, Jack felt solid confidence wash over him. He had conquered the ghosts of his past, proving to himself and others that true strength lies in vulnerability and connection. In this newfound freedom, he reveled in the knowledge that he had not just successfully protected a homestead, but had also redefined his place in the world, claiming his own legacy at last. Jack smiled, aware that he had not only achieved a personal victory, but built something enduring and tangible: trust, community, and hope, ready to inspire all those who believed in transformation and truth. With each front-burner challenge that lay ahead, he was prepared to rise as a force for resilience, a leader unafraid to embrace the complexity of life's journey. Now, more than ever, he embraced an unwavering commitment to the garden, to the people he loved, and to himself. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.